What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So check this out. Sony apparently has already said that they're skipping E3 of 2019, which is very strange. We're going to go over that. Also, it turns out some fake Pokemon Let's Go ROMs are actually bricking Switch systems for people who are trying to attain Pokemon Let's Go through, I guess, not having to pay for the game. We'll say that with their hacked Switch systems. And then also Reggie did comment on the Nintendo 64 Classic. So we're going to get into all of that. As always, guys, make sure you do hit the like button if you do like these videos. It does help out a lot. And we're going to start right away with some quick news. Killer 7 released yesterday on PC, so if you missed this completely, it's out there, it's on Steam. It's supposed to be $20, however, it launched with a 10% discount, so it's $17.99 on there, and this is being published by Nice America, and apparently the port is actually good. I know, right? When you hear Nice America with a game, you get a little concerned, or just Nice in general, when it comes to putting PC games out, as we've seen with things like Ys 8 struggling and other games, but no. Apparently this one is pretty good. Now, it's a port of a GameCube game and then eventually a PS2 game that were released back in 2005, and you don't really need much to play it. Actually, if you go and look at the specs, you need like an integrated video card and 3 gigabytes of hard drive space, and you don't need much. More than likely, if you're watching this on a computer right now, your computer could probably play it. But it was a cool game. It was an on-rails kind of third-person style shooter where you play as a person that has a bunch of different personalities and they all play differently. It was kind of a neat idea for a game. It was very, very weird, but kind of interesting to check out. But that's actually available now on Steam for apparently $18 on sale. We also appear to have 2 games releasing today. We just talked about, of course, Killer 7 releasing yesterday. Well, 2 games are actually out today. One on the Switch, and that is Smite. So we talked about the data mining that was going on. Well, it's actually been now confirmed that it's coming out today, the 16th, and it's coming out similar to how Paladins did. Do you remember Hi-Res put Paladins out, and while that was supposed to be a free-to-play game, and it was on pretty much every other platform, there was a Founders Pack that would get you in, and then eventually it went free-to-play. Looks like they're doing the same thing here with Smite, where there is a Founders Pack for $29.99, and that will get you into the game right away. Otherwise, more than likely what's going to happen, there will be a free-to-play component coming at some point. Not really sure when at the time of this announcement, but Paladins took a little while, so that might be the same situation here with Smite, where you can buy in, you can get a bunch of stuff with your $30, or you can just kind of hang out and wait, and eventually it'll show up as a free-to-play game. So we talked about the other day, I would check out some gameplay, see if it's something you would want to play, or maybe you're already playing it on other platforms, and maybe you want it on your Switch because it's a handheld and everything as well. There you go, you can start picking that up today. The other game that is apparently out today as well after this announcement yesterday is Sunset Overdrive on the PC. Best kept secret, right? Insomniac said it best themselves. Best kept secret on the internet. Yes, Sunset Overdrive on the PC appears to be releasing today after Major Nelson put out what appeared to be an announcement and how Insomniac was going to talk to him on Xbox Wire or Inside Xbox, where they're going to apparently talk a bit about this game releasing. And if they're doing it on a stage with the Xbox, does that mean that there would also be an Xbox One X enhancement patch? Yeah, I could see that. Maybe they even have it added, I guess, to Game Pass, maybe. There's a lot of things they could do at that point. But an Xbox One X enhancement patch makes a ton of sense, especially if it's going to be on PC and you already have all of those added graphical settings and a 4K resolution. Yeah, move that over to the Xbox One X, as well, as I think that game could actually get a bit of a second life on PC, and maybe that'll make somebody look at that and say, okay, can we do a Sunset Overdrive 2? Because according to Insomniac, they're looking for a publisher, so maybe this kind of wakes everything back up and Microsoft comes over and says, hey, let's do that Sunset Overdrive 2, or maybe Sony does it. It's interesting to see this, though, but good to see that Sunset Overdrive is going to get another shot, and PC gamers will get to play the game. And with some of the quick news out of the way, guys, let's jump into some of the bigger stuff. We're starting with the hacked Nintendo Switch situation. See, we already know the Switches are hacked all over the place. The homebrew scene is taken off. That's great. But what's interesting about this situation is generally when this starts to happen, you actually have viruses that are also put out there for certain systems, and the Switch seems to be one that is getting hit with that quite a bit. It seems like when a game that's coming up for Nintendo that's very popular, in this case, Pokemon Let's Go, fake games are put out there, fake ROMs are put out there, with the sole intent being to brick your Switch. That's That's it. And this happened over on GBA Temp. It was reported by Nintendo Soup, and it was kind of put out there as people started to download a fake copy of Pokemon Let's Go, as the version that I had been mentioning and other people had been talking about wasn't shared very publicly. It wasn't out there as much as you would think. Like, you're not going on a website and finding it, but it was shared on different forums and other places, and it wasn't the real game. Now, there is a real game out there that people are playing. You can see it, they're data mining it, all that stuff, but it was being shared around, and immediately when you would download it and run it on your Switch, it would then brick your Switch. Now, if you've done things like backed up different parts of your Switch after you hacked it, you could probably get it back, but if you didn't, your Switch is pretty much done. It's ruined, and it's not coming back. But this isn't really new. Like I said, this has happened before. It happens with PC games a lot, by the way. Like, if a game is coming out and it's not even out yet, people will put viruses and stuff out. You gotta be careful with what you actually download out there. But this is interesting. It's not new. Like I said, we've talked about it even before with the Switch itself with other games. So keep in mind, if you have a Switch and you have modified it in some way and you're thinking to go online and get all the new games early, maybe double check that, or maybe make sure your Switch is backed up, because yeah, it sounds like people are just out there having fun just putting, false games out there that are just designed to damage your Switch. Next up, let's talk about the Nintendo 64 Classic, the heavily rumored Nintendo 64 Classic. See, it seemed like people were expecting it to still get announced for this year and released the holidays, and I've been a bit more, I guess, withdrawn from that idea. I've been kind of thinking if they're going to do it, it's too late and it'll have to be next year. I mean, we saw the PlayStation Classic get announced and it barely made the cutoff coming out in the first week of December. If Nintendo somehow managed to announce it now and get it out in December, that would have been amazing. But I think the N64 Classic is going to be set up for next year. It doesn't necessarily need to be a holiday. Remember that as well. It could be early summer. It could be April. It could still be the holidays. But Reggie Fils-Aimé pretty much shut down any more talks about the Nintendo 64 Classic in an interview with Kotaku, saying, "Would you rule out a Nintendo 64 Classic coming?" That's from the person interviewing him. "I would not ever rule something out," Reggie said, "but what I can tell you is certainly that it's not in our planning horizon." Okay, so obviously he wouldn't confirm the Nintendo 64 Classic here anyway. He wasn't going there to do that, but the fact that he so nonchalantly said, yeah, I mean, maybe, we're not really, it's not really on our planning horizon. That's PR speak there, by the way. They're really saying it's not happening this holiday. If it's not going to come out this holiday, why would they announce it now? It makes no sense. They would announce it next year, early next year, mid next year. They want to get the marketing materials ready and they want to get the hype ready. They want to get the commercials out there, and it's not going to be this year, so why would they bring it out? There's also the possibility that they're still working through some of the finer details when it comes to licensing and figuring out how to get Rare's games on there and just all kinds of stuff. GoldenEye's got to be a whole, just a whole minefield of licensing to figure out if they want that there. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want Perfect Dark there and they're working all of that out with Microsoft and Rare. Or maybe they don't want any of those games and they're just trying to fill out the library with some other third parties. There's a lot of possibilities, and while the PlayStation Classic isn't setting the world on fire, I don't think there's any need for the Nintendo 64 to rush its way out to market and be here for this holiday, because they still have the Super Nintendo Classic and the Nintendo Classic, and I'm gonna be honest, those will probably outsell the PlayStation Classic because people are pretty down right now on what Sony has presented with their plug-and-play system, with the kind of the lack of games there, or the choice of games. It's 20 games. It's not really a lack of games when compared to like the Super Nintendo Classic, but the quality of games, yeah, that's kind of the issue. One thing's for sure, if the Nintendo 64 had come out this year alongside the PlayStation 1, I think it's pretty clear the Nintendo 64 would have pretty much run over the PlayStation Classic. But next year, the PlayStation Classic will still be on the market, and maybe, who knows, Sony will look into something even further than that, maybe, and maybe they do another one that's like the slim PS1 with like DualShocks, or the PS2 Classic. I don't know, but it's interesting to see that, I guess, yeah, the Nintendo 64 Classic, look for it next year is what we're thinking. Next up, let's talk about E3 of 2019. So it's still a ways off, but Sony apparently is not attending E3 at all. Like, they're just not participating, and this happened yesterday and set the internet on fire. People couldn't believe it. And I think it has a lot to do with Sony's history at this event. They've never really missed it at all. They've been there every single year for the past 24 years. This is going to be the first year in 24 years that they have missed E3. They announced like the original PlayStation there for North American audiences, same with the PS2. We saw the terrible presentation for the PS3 there, heard about the Vita. They generally show up, and if they have a new system coming out, they do announce it there. Except for, I guess, the PS4, technically, they showed it off a bit beforehand and then showed up with it. But there's a lot of things going on here, and they even responded in very fine detail as to them doing nothing. And this was the Game Informer saying, as the industry evolves, Sony Interactive Entertainment continues to look for inventive opportunities to engage the community. PlayStation fans mean the world to us, and we always want to innovate, think differently, and experiment with new ways to delight gamers. As a result, we have decided not to participate in E3 in 2019. We are exploring new and familiar ways to engage our community in 2019 and can't wait to share our plans with you. And then they go on further than that, as they're kind of pressed and saying, are you sure you're not doing anything? They said, we will not activate or hold a press conference around E3. Yeah, they're not even activating, guys. It's an odd choice. Okay, they're not going to activate. So they're just not doing anything. Like originally I heard this and I said, oh, maybe they're doing like what EA does with EA Play, or Microsoft technically even was like off of E3. They showed up for the event, but they kind of did their own thing in like their own place and everything. I thought, oh, maybe Sony's just going to show up and do like their own like building or something and have it all there, and that'd be pretty cool. Nope, nothing. They're nothing. They might put some trailers up in accordance with third parties, but they're not showing up or nothing. Which is weird because they usually have a very large floor space there. What happens to that? And then the ESA put out a full briefing, and at the bottom, yes, Sony was left off. Nintendo, Microsoft, Square Enix, Ubisoft, EA, everyone else seemingly is going to E3 for the most part. And the big question now is why? Well, I mean, it's kind of the same reason they canceled the PlayStation Experience, right? I mean, Sean Layton said they didn't have anything to show. So I'm thinking they're not going to E3 because they don't have anything new to show. I mean, maybe people want to see Last of Us again. They can't bring Spider-Man again. They can't make it 4 years in a row. God of War, of course, is out. Days Gone will be out. What do you show? That's their biggest issue, because they're in this odd situation that I don't think they've ever really been in. They're in a situation where the system isn't ready yet. The PS5 isn't ready to be shown right there in a big blowout. And they want to still have some stuff for the PlayStation Experience, since they just had to cancel the PlayStation Experience this past year. So what do? Well, they just don't show up to E3 apparently, and they're going to have, I think, a big blowout at their own PlayStation Experience later on that year. So 2019 PlayStation Experience will probably be what you want to watch. However, I think the PS5 might show up sooner than that. Not in full force, because I think the PlayStation Experience is where it really shows up in full force, but they could technically have a briefing about it, kind of like what they did with the PS4. I believe they did a briefing on that in like February that year, and talked about some of the specs and stuff that a lot of people don't really care about, but they talked about 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory and all this stuff. They could do something similar for the PS5 for kind of the tech heads and stuff out there, and then show up at their PlayStation Experience with the actual box, the price, and the release date. And remember, they don't have to release the PS5 on a holiday. They could show up in like April with it, right? Or March. I mean, Nintendo did it, and Sony probably could too. So 2020, I think a lot of people are also thinking that's probably when the PS5 is coming, somewhere in there. And I think they're going to use 2019 to build it up. Possibly 2 events, one earlier in the year, PlayStation Experience to cap it off, and then we roll into the PlayStation 5's launch window sometime in 2020. But it's going to be fun. Now, in our last bit of news, let's keep it rolling with the PS5, because, well, there's a LinkedIn profile that was left up for Square, and talks about a new AAA game, apparently for PS5. Here you go. It says it right here at the top. New AAA title for the PlayStation 5. And guess what? That's Luminous Productions. That's actually interesting, because that could be where Final Fantasy 16 is originating from, as obviously we've seen Square do some weird stuff now, where they've parted ways with Tabata, who was originally heading that studio. And now, all of a sudden, here's a LinkedIn that's talking about a new AAA title. And I do look at this and I say, yeah, that sounds like Final Fantasy 16, as there are rumors that he may have left, or they had conflicting interests, because he didn't really want to do Final Fantasy 16, but of course Square sees the money there and say, people know this, we want to do Final Fantasy 16, so they kind of split. And a new AAA game, Final Fantasy 15 was massive in terms of budget. This, I think, is 16, and I think it's going to be a while, so we'll see about that one when that does decide to show up, but I don't think we're going to see anything about this AAA title for years and years, but it'll be interesting when we do, because I mean, I think most of us figure there's going to be a Final Fantasy 16, and the Luminous Studio, Luminous Productions, seems like the place they'll be working on it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure to hit the like button. It does help out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it is Sony skipping E3. You think it's a bad idea? Should they still go, even if they don't have much to show? I mean, third parties are still going to show up there with a lot of PS4 stuff, so the PlayStation 4 is going to be represented, but to have one of the big three just not show up at all, nothing on the floor, no presentation, even if it's a streamed one, is that a bad idea? Let me know about that, guys, down below. And then what about the Nintendo 64 Classic? Do you think Reggie's just trying to throw a smoke screen there, or do you think, yeah, sometime next year we'll see the 64 Classic? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.